The following is a public preview of the New Models podcast. For our complete library, visit patreon.com/newmodels or newmodels.substack.com.
You're now listening to New Models.
Greenroom, a New Models podcast.
Welcome to New Models Greenroom. On this episode, we speak with Ville Haimala and Martti Kalliala of the experimental music duo Amnesia Scanner, along with their regular collaborator Freeka Tet. We recorded this conversation at the end of 2024, following the release of their latest album together, Hoax, and a few days after Luigi Mangione murdered the United Healthcare CEO. The conversation is very much about music and the crafting of this album, but also what Ville, Martti, and Freeka perceive music and its object forms and its audiences to even be at this point. One note, due to unforeseen circumstances, Martti could only join us for the beginning of the conversation. You might notice that he suddenly disappears. With this change of plans, we split the episode into two parts. The first focusing more on Amnesia Scanner itself, which might be better described as a skunkworks in the subcultural industrial complex than a band. And the second part expanding into Ville and Freeka's personal practices with the likes of artists Anna Imhof and The Weeknd. The insights and predictions our guests share throughout feel particularly resonant in a moment dominated by noise, distortion, and all kinds of sculpting and filtering of the waveforms of reality. I'm Lil Internet, joined by my co-host Carly Busta. Our guests are Ville Haimala and briefly Martti Kalliala of Amnesia Scanner, together with Freeka Tet. Let's get into it.
I know we did try recording back around the time of your tier list release in 2019, but I think COVID had just set in and we hadn't yet optimized our remote recording setup. In any case, we're really thrilled to have you on the show. Ville, Martti, Freeka, welcome to New Models.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So that listeners can connect the name and voice, could you each briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Martti of Amnesia Scanner. I'm also half or third of Nemesis, which is a consultancy I founded with Emily Siegel.
Great.
I'm Ville Haimala, the other half of the band and musician, working a lot also in the world of art and producing for other musicians, but like mainly Amnesia Scanner.
Great.
Hi, I'm Freeka Tet, based in New York. I'm an artist. I'm doing music, but also visuals. This is how I met Amnesia. I was mostly working on the visual side, live side at the beginning. We met like 6 years ago, and so here we go.
Nice. Well, most of the New Models audience will be pretty familiar with Amnesia Scanner, but let's supply some context anyway. Amnesia Scanner began around 2014 as a side project, an anonymous alias where your personal identities were not an active factor. Ville, to quote you in that interview we did with you and Martti for Kaleidoscope back in 2019, the idea was to create a world from scratch. And your strategy for doing this was to build a website and let it be a proxy for a new online community. So it's as much a musical project as it is a conceptual media project. It's a way of engaging with music given the media structures that we now have. As best as you can recall it, can you talk a little bit about that era of media and like what were the motivations that compelled you to go anon and online? I say this just as like some bedrock for thinking about the album because it's more than it's music, but in its expanded form.
We had a project before that with Martti. It was called Renaissance Man, which was much more like in the kind of world of club music and DJing. And we sort of grew tired of the world of clubbing and the whole infrastructure. It felt narrow, and we wanted to find a new way of quite freely experiment. And there was no huge plan for it to be like a main project, and then it just started to take shape.
Yeah, this was also the era of like music blogs.
Right.
So like, I mean, now in retrospect, distributing music through like novel channels was like a viable path at that point, which I think is way harder at this point. Like with us, it started on YouTube, I think.
Yeah, and the website where we're just dropping files here and there. Because it was after MySpace,
exactly,
before Instagram.
And SoundCloud must have just started then, so there was this feeling that you had these other distribution channels. For the first time, really, you felt like you had these channels. But of course, that's 10 years ago now.
I was just recently looking at our YouTube channel. I think the first videos are from 2013, so I think that's when, like, technically, officially, Amnesia Scanner
It feels like a totally different universe. It's crazy.
Like for sure,
Hoax is your fourth studio album alongside a bunch of EPs and mixtapes and live shows and digital projects. The music industry looks different than it did when you started Amnesia Scanner and completely different than it did when the commodity objects of the music industry were formalized, like the album or the EP, even the music video. So what for you makes Hoax a discrete release? There's like the traditional object form of the record, in this case, a double record of 11 songs each. But when you think of the parameters of Hoax, where are the edges of the project for you? And what are some of the binding characteristics or qualities?
I would put together also the previous record that we made together, which is called Strobe.rip. Our original plan was that we work on music and we perform it, and the music sort of takes shape in the same room with the audience. And the hope was that the album would be actually the kind of final product of this like long journey. But then the industry doesn't really work like that. And we realized that everyone that helps us put together these tours and performances was like, well, you kind of need some material, something to do press with and something for the promoters to kind of like get them excited and so on. So then we started, okay, we're going to create music for like a first performance. And the Strobe.rip was the soundtrack for this first performance together. And then this has been a journey of making music and remaking the music and kind of like using the same themes and same samples even and same kind of elements and let the music grow together with time and together with the response from the audience. Because the album is quite a final, like if you think of how music is released, it feels almost out of date. You work a long time, you make this masterpiece of an album and then it comes out on a release date and then it's over. Technically, a week or two after it, it's like either you need to kind of like artificially pump more energy into it in this like brat style where you're just like pulling it up and up and up, or then it's just like you need to move on. But it's like a weirdly unsatisfying way to work. We got a little bit inspired of how games are these days. You put things out there that are not final or ready necessarily and let the community, your fans, engage with that and maybe give their input even, and then you bring it to the more final form together with them. And we've been also experimenting along the way. Spoiler, it's not the final form of Hoax.
Oh, nice.
So, it's an ongoing experiment.
I like that because just to put a pin in this idea of the fans being participatory, we've been thinking a lot about how content flows and content flows from the creator to an audience, but it's really the era of fanfic. So whatever that content is, it's really just raw material for the fans to then metabolize and to turn into something. So to continue that relationship and then volley it back to them again, you know, still tuning it with your expertise and your aesthetic precision is a really nice way of working. So it becomes a back and forth. The album is only really made once it's received.
Yeah. And already now in the Strobe.rip, it was like our common album, and now in Hoax, it's Freeka's version of the album.
Maybe we should actually ask you, Freeka. So there are two parts of this release, and the part that you've done is very specific conceptually. Could you say a few words about it?
Like we have been like talking about how Amnesia has been always about this internet culture meme approach. In my head, it was about, would I cancel Amnesia Scanner? What would be the way I can cancel them? And so it became like just this sonic process of using noise cancellation with AirPods to like do new material. But it was also personally me being like, I feel I'm more like into concept than like writing music and writing melody or writing beats. And it was like, how can I do music material without writing anything? Uh-huh. So like really based on the process and the treatment.
Right. So the concept was, how do you cancel Amnesia Scanner? You mean that kind of tongue-in-cheek, but you physically took the AS side of Hoax and you used noise cancellation technology to create what's essentially,
it's like the inverse.
It's like the inverse of it.
The second disc is actually what noise-canceling headphones would be generating to cancel the sound of that album being played in a room or something, right?
Yes.
Is that correct, or how would you explain the actual process?
Pretty much like the way noise cancellation works is you take a signal, invert the phase of that signal, and add it to the mix. So you think you're hearing less. It sounds more quiet, but it's way much more dense in terms of a signal.
So it's super fried in a way.
Yeah, and actually it's a funny fact, like we realize, because we keep like changing and redoing things, it becomes kind of hard to like find the source material of songs. We're like some song where we don't even know where the stems are anymore. Just keep being reprocessed. So like the meme approach is very, very valid when it comes to the audio. We like keep frying everything again and again.
That's kind of beautiful. Like the reason to put out an album is to protect some form of the songs, because on your own hard drives, they just become digital noise.
Yeah, like Hoax is a snapshot of those tracks and those ideas at that moment, and then they kind of keep on moving.
I like that idea that albums are just snapshots.
Yeah.
There was the one Kanye album that he kept changing it on Spotify.
Oh, yeah,
he just
right.
kept replacing the version. I mean, can anyone do that, or did he have to?
I think you can, but of course you can't do it as spontaneously and fast. But I think you technically can update things.
I think like a release is like an entry in like a database, so you can like update the image associated with it as well as like the sound file. So technically it is possible, but it isn't as fluid of a process as one might like.
And I'm sure that in our dark algorithmic streaming world, it's going to be flagged instantly if you like change the content or something, and you will never ever be like played again.
I swear also on not the latest Yeet album, but the one before, I swear they replaced one of the songs. They just changed like the shuffle or the swing of the rhythm track. And it never hit the same. Like, I feel like I'm being gaslit by the track because I'm just like, no, it wasn't that way.
This is full on gaslighting for sure.
Yeah. Talking about this noise canceling technology, I mean, I've been thinking about psychoacoustics a lot, how humans perceive sound. And I mean, like the classic example, so classic you probably only know about it from hearing like boomers complain about it, is like TV commercials being way louder than the TV shows when you're watching them. Because volume measured in decibel by a sound meter actually does not correlate to how loud you perceive something to be. It has to do with compression, dynamic range, things like this. I mean, also playing with AI-generated music, I noticed that there's a lot psychoacoustically going on, like depending on what level, how loud you listen to it or what kind of headphones, you can kind of hear different layers. And I imagine this is because the models were trained on MP3s, which use all kinds of weird psychoacoustic techniques, especially masking. And the weirdest kind of masking is temporal masking.
What's
where
temporal masking?
A loud sound will actually block our perception of a quieter sound that precedes it. So there's a delay between the sound occurring and our brain letting us consciously hear it. And in that delay, the brain changes what it allows us to hear. And so I'm just generally curious if there's any areas like this that you foresee as opening up a new potential in producing music.
I think it's interesting, especially, I guess, during COVID, and I mean, it's been already happening before, but like, I think the kind of personal listening space, and I guess like Billie Eilish is one of the first artists that were like really performing for headphones from the beginning, and the kind of like treatment of her voice was this very like almost ASMR-y, very close, and they were very consciously like mixing it for the voice in your head, spatial experience, or like Apple's official IMAX-y approaches. But I find the subliminal side of it is much more interesting, like using frequency either like outside the spectrum or like MP3 compression is, I guess that's the new vinyl crackle, kind of like an 128 kilobit.
Collecting rare 128 kilobit
Exactly.
MP3s.
Exactly. Yeah, because I think everything's also driving to be much more like HD and much more like, is that the kind of answer to almost like the kind of overly three-dimensional experience that like then something like Freeka's noise cancelling, it's super dense, but it's also not super stereo. It's like a very kind of like a completely different world.
Yeah, actually, when I was working on the noise cancelling, one of the tests I did, I was doing noise cancelling, but through script and bouncing the invert and the normal mix together. And this one was crazy, like acoustically would do something really weird. And I think it has to do with certain phase. It was not fully aligned, because for noise cancellation to work, the phase need to be perfectly aligned. But I think Ableton has some kind of weird latency that is very tiny, but in this level, you hear it. So what happened with that bounce, the song would be like, if you hear it through a phone, so it would be like only like mid frequency, but it will start to like really pressure your skull. You would feel like something is pushing on your head.
Yeah, it felt like your head is exploding.
So you had this pull pushing feeling that was really weird. And I spoke with Bill about it from Pan, and it was like, well, let's make it enjoyable to like the audience. So he was kind of not really into it. But yeah, there was this weird thing where it felt weird when you're listening to it, but it will feel really bizarre when you stop playing it. Probably like your eardrum would like come back to normal and don't have as much tension to it. But it felt like puking sensation. It would really like make you feel like really icky. But it's funny. I always been really interested in all this acoustic illusion. I don't know if you're familiar with Diane Dutch. She's really famous. She did this file that you can like download online. It's called Cambiata illusion, which is just sine waves that you meant to hear with the headphones. And when you listen to it, you will hear all the bass on the right side and all the high frequency on the left side. But what happened is if you turn the headphones on your head, you still hear the low frequency on the right side. You can turn as much as you want. It will always stay like this because it's just the way your brain processes it. So I always been interested in this.
Wow.
And I remember I did this show probably 10 years ago in a really big venue in Paris called the Zenet. And it was maybe the first time I had access to those kind of sound system. And I remember playing a 16 kilohertz frequency before my gig, which will like really tense the ear, but you hear it only when you move your head. And I left that for like 15 minutes before playing, and then stop this frequency, which you can feel your hair like going coming back. And yeah, it does like really interesting things to your body. And actually, I was always interested into when you got like those big PA live, do people follow what they know, like the memory of a song when you go see an artist you like, because there's so much bass? Is it like a physical body related experience, or do you actually listen? And what I did is it was some max MSP patch that would like take off the low frequency, everything in the kick below like 100 hertz. And all the top of the kick will be moved around on the grid, so not keeping the beat, but all the bass will stay on the grid. Because I wanted to know if people like will still dance and be just about feeling or like listen. And it was kind of interesting that it was clearly like just about feeling the vibration in a big room.
There's a question about scanning and sensing versus reading and listening. But I wonder if I think about stage shows now, they're so important to use just because I'm thinking of Amnesia Scanner in the idiom of pop, if you think of Charlie or if you think of Lana or if you think of Travis Scott, the stage show is huge. That is the moment of engagement. I know that you've tried some really interesting experimental ways of including the fan in the production. Of course, whenever you see any YouTube now of any stage show, you see a million phones in the air. Can you speak about how you think about the fan as a stage element in your production?
I mean, Freeka, you come from a background of also working on lots of live stage productions,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
With Amnesia Scanner, it started from us wanting to experiment of the full fundamentals of what a live show is in terms of like where is the artist, where does the sound come from. It was the time of deconstructed club music after all, so we tried to rethink some of those elements or like at least experiment with them. And then once you start touring, you're faced with a lot of realities. There is a stage, there is a screen, and an audience is in a specific point. But recently we've been thinking in two different strains, like a regular gig and how to treat that, but then also hopefully very specific shows where we could change those parameters and create a bespoke setup for the music. Of course, it's based on more like a band logic of you have a stage, you elevate an artist so that more people can see. Like if you think bare bones architecturally, like why is this a concert? Why does it work in this specific way? But I think there's no reason for our kind of music to function in this way.
Right, you're on laptops.
Yeah. And I think if you can do immersion or like envelop people inside the show, we can lose the world completely and make people function within the show in a different way than just pointing their phones towards the stage.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, something that is really cool is when it comes to like Ville, Martti, and I together, we're kind of like a dream team when it comes to live shows. Ville and Martti were like architect before, like the smoke totally disregarding the space. Like, you don't know where you are anymore. For me, it's clearly like an architect move that is really strong statement. On my side, my main job for money has been always to do creative consulting for like bigger acts. I did like Childish Gambino, like those guys. So like way bigger scale. And same, like Ville could work with bigger acts as a musical conductor. Marty, same with Nemesis. We have this thing where we have the bigger scale vision all the time, every day in our daily life with our work. Mm-hmm. And we can play with that. And I think Amnesia and us in general, where I think we're like pretty good, is we managed to do really impactful visual things with very little. On stage, we never have too much things. That's a personal choice. I hate hardware. I don't want to like carry shit around. I hate it. And I think right now we're like trying to go outside of the venue, but like keeping this live aspect. Actually, when we did the Unplugged project, which was this long live stream in the woods, you know those 10 hours video, or like the sound of the rainforest, and you put that to go to bed. Mm-hmm. We're like, oh, let's do those 10-hour long content that is very calm and quiet, that we could give the link where like people can relax after the show, after raging. And I think Unplugged came from that at first.
It's like a chill out zone.
Yeah, like chill out.
I was reading an interview with you. I think it was in Days, although I can't remember, Freeka, and you were talking about how less than regular production software or traditional instruments, the way you play music is through writing code. And Ville, I think of your collaborations with artists who work in a kind of Gesamtkunstwerk way. And it occurred to me that playing music today, of course, Amnesia Scanner wouldn't be successful if there weren't a core musical mimetic quality, if there weren't a degree of musical virtuosity at its center. So it revolves around that. That's like the central point. But playing music today becomes a kind of like playing an expanded field of instruments, which includes your fans or your audience, which includes media systems that transmit your work, which includes interfacing with physical built architecture. Maybe what I'm saying is kind of pat, but I think it's an interesting conceptual shift to make. Like, what if one thinks of playing music as playing a much broader set of instruments, which include non-traditional instruments, like playing protocols of all kinds.
100%. And I mean, it's with this project, especially Hoax, in the very beginning of Amnesia Scanner, we tried to like create a system that has less of a hierarchy, and there's like less of this like dominant forms of like an album or music video or a live show or something like that, that it's more like a stream of things. We wouldn't need to be so precious about like if this is the lead single of this, this is more like feeding things into this, in the beginning, imaginary community, but then what turned into an actual community. And I think in the same way now, we really wanted to be more free. It doesn't matter if it's out already, we can put a different version. We can just give a track to one single person or release it with a big PR campaign. And in the same way as well, I feel in the live show, we've been fantasizing of doing things that are longer or doing things where we take over like a whole space for like a whole day or a week or make like an Amnesia Scanner Freeka Tet bar or whatever. Also for the fact that we like the spectrum of the music we make, and we're not people who live at the nightclub anymore necessarily, or like we're also more open to like different ways of experiencing these things. And like it doesn't need to be always drunk or high in a music festival. It could be in a different space.
Yeah, and I think presenting immersive stuff doesn't mean you actually connect with your audience. And like it's very like a small detail, but like Amnesia always been those dark shadows, this dark character. Like there's not that many pictures of Marty and Ville. But lately, I've more this need to feel like a bit more connected, which feels, for me personally, really interesting.
Yeah. It's also connected a lot to the fact that in the beginning of Amnesia Scanner, we didn't explain things at all what we did. We didn't have almost no press releases, anything, because it was also the time where there was a lot of music journalism and blogs and stuff like that who would obsessively interpret and like write about what we did. There was like amazing blogs, tiny mixtapes and these kind of places where there was a great writers who would really spend a lot of time. And I would consider them being almost like participants of building the world of Amnesia Scanner, so to speak. And then there is so many more of our very loyal fans who've been following this whole journey and who have a lot to say about this project. And we are in touch with them and they write to us it has turned into like an actual community where we value the opinions of the people who've really spent a lot of time with the project. And I think now we can take some of the kind of safety off because like...
If you're hearing this message, you've completed the first step towards becoming a New Models member. To continue, visit patreon.com/newmodels or newmodels.substack.com. A complete library containing hundreds of rare New Models episodes awaits.